The patrol car followed him for exactly 2.3 miles before the lights came on. Marcus Darnell Webb noticed the black and white cruise reezing out of the gas station parking lot the moment he pulled back onto Highway 90. He noticed because he always noticed. 22 years of working civil rights cases had trained him to see things other people chose not to see. He adjusted his hands to 10 and 2 on the steering wheel of the rented Chevrolet Malibu. Silver, four-door, forgettable. He kept his speed at exactly 53 miles per hour in a 55 zone. He let the distance between himself and the cruiser remain consistent. He breathed slowly through his nose. He did not accelerate. He did not panic. He just watched. The blue and red strobes lit up his rearview mirror at 10:47 in the morning on a Wednesday in October, on a stretch of empty Tulane Road outside Lufkin, Texas, where the pine trees grew thick on both sides and the closest building was a feed store 3 miles back. Marcus signaled immediately. He pulled onto the shoulder without hesitation. He put the car in park, rolled the window down halfway, and placed both hands flat on the steering wheel where they could be seen clearly from outside. He had done this before. Every black man in America had done this before. The difference was what Marcus was carrying in his jacket pocket. Not a weapon, not drugs. A credentials case, soft leather, government issue with a gold badge inside that read United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. The other difference was what he had on his laptop in the back seat. A working case file. 47 documented complaints of racial profiling against the Lufkin Police Department over the past 4 years. Every one of them dismissed. Every single one. Officer Terry Brad did not know any of that when he climbed out of his cruiser. He was 36 years old, thick through the shoulders, with a sunburned neck and a haircut that sat 2 weeks past needing a trim. He walked with the particular swagger of a man who had never in his professional life been told no by anyone who mattered. 8 years on the force. 6 formal complaints filed against him. 0 consequences. His supervisors called him aggressive but effective. The people he pulled over on Highway 90 had other words for him. He approached the driver's side window from slightly behind. A classic tactic designed to keep the driver off balance, to make them turn their head, to make them feel watched before a single word was spoken. Marcus kept his eyes forward. "Good morning, officer." His voice was even, neutral, professional. Brant leaned down and looked at Marcus the way some men look at things they have already decided are worthless. His eyes moved around the interior of the Malibu. He saw the rental sticker on the dash. He saw the laptop bag in the back seat. He saw a black man in a plain polo shirt and khaki pants who looked, by all appearances, like someone who had absolutely no business driving this particular stretch of road on a Wednesday morning. License and registration. No greeting back. No explanation for the stop. Marcus moved slowly, narrating every action before he made it. "My license is in my wallet, right rear pocket. I am going to reach for it slowly. Is that acceptable?" Brant said nothing. He watched. Marcus retrieved the wallet, removed the driver's license, handed it through the window. Then he opened the glove compartment with the same deliberate care and produced the rental agreement. He laid both on the window ledge between them like a man who had nothing to hide and everything to document. Brant took both without looking at them. He was looking at the laptop bag. "What is that in the back seat?" "Work materials," Marcus said. "What kind of work?" "Government work." Brant smiled at that. It was not a friendly smile. He said, "Government work. Right. And what branch of the government sends fellas out to rent Malibu S in Angelina County on a Wednesday morning?" Marcus looked straight ahead through the windshield. A pine tree at the edge of the shoulder had a woodpecker hole near the base, the bark ringed and weathered around it. He counted the rings while he formulated his answer. "The kind that files paperwork," he said. Brant straightened up and walked back to his cruiser slowly, and Marcus watched him in the side mirror. The officer sat inside his vehicle for 11 minutes. 11 full minutes. Running the plates, running the name, doing whatever it was he was doing. Marcus did not reach for his phone. He did not check his watch. He sat and waited with the patience of a man who had learned long ago that patience was not weakness. It was strategy. When Brent came back, something in his posture had shifted. Something slightly less confident. He had run Marcus's name through the National Crime Information Center and the result had come back with a notation that should have stopped everything right there. Restricted access. Federal personnel file. Level 5 clearance required. Brandt stared at that screen for 7 full seconds. 7 seconds of silence inside the cruiser while the radio crackled softly and a hawk turned lazy circles above the pine line. Then he made a decision, the kind of decision that does not feel like a decision in the moment, the kind that only reveals itself for what it truly was later. In a federal courtroom in front of a jury, he chose to keep going, maybe a clerical error, maybe a sealed record. Whatever it was, he decided it did not matter. Because Terry Brandt had been deciding that inconvenient information did not matter for 8 years, and nothing had ever stopped him before. "I am going to need you to step out of the vehicle," Brandt said. Marcus was quiet for 2 full seconds. 2 measured breaths. "For what reason?" "I smell an odor. Could be narcotics. I need to conduct a search." Marcus looked at him steadily. His voice did not change. "Officer, I have not violated any traffic laws. I have complied with every request you have made. Before this escalates further, I want to inform you that I am a federal employee, and I strongly recommend that you contact your supervisor before proceeding." Brandt's jaw tightened. "Sir, step out of the vehicle. Now." Marcus opened the door slowly. He unfolded himself from the seat and stood up to his full height. 6 feet, even calm as standing water on a windless day. He did not argue. He did not gesture. He put his hands where Brandt could see them unweighted. And here is the part that people need to understand about what happened next. Because this is the part that gets lost when these stories get told. Marcus was not afraid, but he was furious. Not the hot, loud kind of furious that makes people do things they regret. The cold kind. The kind that lies behind the sternum and keeps a running tally. Because Marcus had seen this exact moment play out 47 times in case files. 47 different people on roads exactly like this one, stopped by officers exactly like this one. And in every single one of those 47 cases, the complaint had been filed, the file had been closed, and the officer had driven home like nothing happened. Marcus placed his hands flat on the trunk lid. The Texas sun was sitting directly overhead and the metal was hot enough to sting his palms. He held them there anyway. Brad began the search. Glove compartment, under the seats. Then he unzipped the laptop bag and rifled through the folders inside and found nothing but manila envelopes. Printed documents, and a federal case number stamped across the top of every single page. He did not read the case number closely enough. He should have. Because if he had, he would have seen his own department's name printed directly beneath it. Keep listening. Because what happens in the next 4 minutes will change everything. Brandt was leaning back into the vehicle for the 3rd time when a second car appeared on the highway, slowing as it approached the shoulder. It was not a police cruiser. It was a dark blue Ford Expedition with government plates, and it parked directly behind Brandt's cruiser with a kind of unhurried precision that made clear its driver had all the time in the world and knew it. The woman who stepped out was 44 years old, medium height, natural hair pulled back tight, wearing a charcoal blazer over a white button-down. She had a badge clipped to her waistband. She walked past Brandt's cruiser without stopping and went directly to where Marcus was standing at the rear of the Malibu. She looked at Marcus first. "You all right?" "Yes," he said. She nodded once. Then she turned to Brandt, and her voice carried the particular calm of someone who has delivered this kind of news before and has learned that calm is the sharpest possible tool. "Officer Brandt, I am Special Agent Diane Cortland, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Beaumont Field Office. I need you to step over here with me for a moment." Brandt looked at her badge. He looked at Marcus. He looked back at the badge. "What is this about?" Cortland held his gaze without blinking. "The case file in that vehicle," she said. "Case number Department of Justice CR 2024 TX, Arrow 47. That is an active federal investigation into this department. The man whose car you just searched is the lead investigator." Brandt did not move. The world went very quiet on that shoulder of Highway 90. A semi rolled past in the far lane and the displaced air rocked the Malibu on its shocks. A bird called once somewhere deep in the pines and then fell silent. Behind them, Faint as a radio in another room, a country station played something with a steel guitar. And then, in the span of 3 seconds, Terry Brandt's face moved through for different expressions: confusion, disbelief, the first cold touch of understanding, and then the fourth one, the one that settled in unstayed, the look of a man who has been standing on ice, that he believed was solid and has just heard it crack beneath his feet. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him. Not the way he had looked at him through the window, as something to be processed, something to be managed. He looked at him the way a person looks when the floor has shifted and they realize the conversation they just had was not the conversation they thought they were having. Marcus looked back at him. He said nothing. He did not need to. The silence stretched for full seconds. For seconds where everything that was about to happen existed in potential, where every consequence that Terry Brandt had avoided for 8 years began gathering itself into something real and irreversible. Then Brandt swallowed. He looked at the ticket book still in his hand. He looked at the laptop bag still lying open on the Malibu's back seat. He looked at the federal case number printed on the top sheet of every document he had just rifled through. His hand dropped to his side. You want to know how I know Marcus was counting? Because later, when asked to write his formal incident report, he listed every violation in chronological order with exact timestamps. Stop without probable cause, 1047. Failure to state reason for stop, 1048. Extended detention without justification, 1047 through 1134. 47 minutes total. Search of vehicle without consent or warrant, 1103. Dismissal of federal identification attempt, 1102. 6 violations. Written in a plain government memo with Marcus's signature at the bottom and Diane Cortland's as witness. That memo became part of a federal package submitted to the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Texas 6 days later. But before Cortland and Marcus drove away, one more thing happened on that shoulder of Highway 90. Brandt stood next to his cruiser, ticket book in hand, and he looked at Marcus one final time. I was just doing my job, he said. His voice had gone flat, not angry, not defensive anymore. He sounded like a man already rehearsing for a conversation he did not want to have. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and removed a credentials case. He opened it briefly. Let Brandt see the badge and the Department of Justice identification card. Then he closed it and put it away. I know, Marcus said. That is exactly the problem. He got in the car. Cortland followed in the expedition. They drove north and left Terry Brandt standing on the shoulder with pine trees on both sides in the ticket book. He did not end up using on 7 seconds of silence that he would spend a long time thinking about. The story did not start on Highway 90 though. It started 36 years before that, in a different state, on a different road, with a different man. Marcus Webb grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a neighborhood called Scotlandville on the north side of the city, where the streets were old and the houses were close together, and everyone knew everyone's business whether they wanted to or not. His father, James Webb, drove a city transit bus for 31 years. He worked the morning route starting at 4:45 every single weekday. Never missed a shift in 3 decades. Never called in sick. Never, in 31 years of driving the same roads in the same uniform, received so much as a parking ticket. In the summer of Marcus's 15th year, James Webb was pulled over on his way home from work by a Baton Rouge officer who said he matched the description of a robbery suspect. James was 42 years old, 5'9", wearing his Transit Authority uniform with his name embroidered on the chest pocket. He was handcuffed on the side of the road and held in the back of a patrol car for 2 hours and 14 minutes, while the officer confirmed he was not, in fact, the person they were looking for. No apology was given. No record was made. The officer said later it was a routine inquiry. James Webb never talked about that afternoon. He came home, changed his clothes, sat at the kitchen table, and ate dinner without saying a word. But 15-year-old Marcus had seen his father's face when he walked through the door. He had seen what 2 hours and 14 minutes in the back of a police car does to a man who has never done anything wrong. He had watched his father sit down quietly and decide that some things were simply not worth the energy of being angry about. Marcus spent the next 36 years deciding they were. He was a junior at Louisiana State University when he decided on law school. He was 28 when he passed the bar. He was 31 when he applied to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division with a letter of intent that his supervisor later described, quietly and only once, as the most focused statement of purpose he had seen in 20 years of hiring. He rose slowly in the division. He was not flashy. He did not give interviews or appear on panels or cultivate any visibility that might make people recognize him on the street. He built cases the way a carpenter builds good furniture, carefully, methodically, one joint at a time, checking each connection before moving to the next. By the time he was 51 years old and sitting in that rented Malibu on a Wednesday morning in October, Marcus Webb had led 43 federal civil rights investigations resulting in 38 convictions, 9 consent decrees with police departments, and the termination of 14 officers across 5 states. He was not famous. That was entirely by design. The Lufkin case had started 14 months earlier with a single email forwarded to his office by a community organization called the East Texas Accountability Project. The email contained a spreadsheet, 47 names, 47 written complaints filed with the Lufkin Police Department between January of 2020 and March of 2024. Drivers stopped without cause, vehicles searched without consent, complaints filed, complaints dismissed, officers cleared. The cycle documented in clean columns, repeating for 4 consecutive years. Marcus had printed that spreadsheet and taped it to the wall directly above his desk the day he opened the file. He was on his way to interview the 38th person on that list when Terry Brandt's lights came on in his rearview mirror. Now here is the thing most people miss about what Marcus did during that 47 minutes on the shoulder of the highway. And it matters because it tells you everything about the kind of man he was. He could have ended the stop within 45 seconds. One sentence, the badge in his hand, and Brandt would have retreated to his cruiser and driven away, and the whole thing would have been a non-event. Marcus knew that. He made a different choice. Because every second he stood at that trunk, every minute of extended detention, every document Brandt touched without a warrant was evidence. The rental agreement, the laptop bag, the timestamps, every moment was building a record that could not be argued away later in a dismissal hearing. He did not stay silent to be clever. He stayed silent because the 47 people on that spreadsheet deserved a record that was airtight. It did not feel good to stand on hot asphalt with his palms on a burning trunk lid while a man with 6 unaddressed complaints went through his case files. It felt necessary. Those are not the same thing, and Marcus had stopped confusing them a long time ago. 3 days after the stop, a 68-year-old retired school principal named Chester Rowan was sitting in his front porch chair in the Dunbar neighborhood of Lufkin when his granddaughter came outside with her phone. The video had been filmed by a 27-year-old named Reggie Fountain, who had been driving the opposite direction on Highway 90 when he saw the stop and pull onto the far shoulder and filmed through his passenger window for 39 of the 47 minutes the encounter lasted. The footage showed a black man in a polo shirt, hands flat on the trunk of a silver car, standing motionless in the Texas sun, while an officer searched the vehicle. The man did not argue. He did not move. He simply stood and waited with a stillness that, once you watched the video, you did not forget. Reggie posted it the night of the stop. By the 3rd day, it had been viewed 1.4 million times. The Lufkin Police Department released a statement. The stop was conducted in accordance with department policy. The officer acted appropriately based on observed behaviors consistent with possible drug activity. No contraband was found. The subject was released without citation. That was the statement. Chester Rowan read it on his granddaughter's phone and said quietly, "To no one in particular, they never change." He was wrong. He had every reason in the world to believe he was right. But he was wrong. The formal referral from the United States Attorney's Office arrived at the Lufkin Police Department on a Thursday morning, 17 days after the stop. It was a 14-page document addressed to Chief Gordon Farrell and copied to the mayor's office, the city attorney, and the Angelina County Sheriff. It requested all documentation related to Officer Brandt's conduct on the date in question, It requested all internal affairs files related to his 6 prior complaints. It requested the complete body camera footage from the vehicle stop, all 47 minutes of it. And it contained one paragraph near the end that Chief Farrell later told his deputy he had never encountered in a federal communication in 26 years of law enforcement. The subject of the vehicle stop was a federal investigator conducting an active investigation into this department. The Department of Justice considers this a matter of significant concern and will conduct a comprehensive review of department practices, complaint handling procedures, and supervisory oversight protocols. Brandt was placed on administrative leave the following Monday morning. He did not go quietly. He called his union representative within 20 minutes. He spent the first week insisting he had done nothing wrong, that he had followed proper procedure, that the scent of narcotics was genuine even if nothing was found, that he had not known who Marcus was and could not be held responsible for not knowing. All of that was factually true. He had not known, but here is where the story moved in a direction that Terry Brandt had not anticipated. Because the Department of Justice investigation was not built on what happened on Highway 90, Marcus had been building toward this for 14 months. The stop had not changed the case. It had simply made the case visible to a public that had not known it existed. The actual evidence was already assembled. 47 traffic stop reports, cross-referenced against body camera footage and complaint dismissal records. Statistical analysis showing that black drivers represented 11% of the county population, but accounted for 43% of the documented stops on Highway 90 over the preceding 4 years. Footage from 6 of Brandt's previous stops where the stated reason for the stop was directly contradicted by dashboard camera recordings that the department had initially described as unavailable. A senior sergeant named Garrett Pullman had personally signed off on the dismissal of 4 of Brandt's 6 prior complaints. He had also authored a performance review the previous year describing Brandt as one of the department's most reliable patrol officers. Pullman was named in the referral as a subject of the supervisory oversight review. When Marcus sat across from the United States Attorney on a Wednesday afternoon to brief the full case, the attorney listened for 40 minutes without a single interruption. At the end, he looked at the wall where Marcus had taped a printed copy of the original spreadsheet. He said, "How many of those 47 people do we have current contact information for?" Marcus said, "All 47. "Good," the attorney said. "We are going to need statements from every one of them." It took 4 months. 4 months of phone calls and home visits and conversations held at kitchen tables across Angelina County. Some people on the list were afraid to talk. Some had moved away and did not want to be found. Some said they had stopped expecting anything to come from their complaints years ago and saw no reason to believe this time was different. Marcus sat with every single one of them. He listened. He wrote down what they said, and he told them the same thing each time. The only honest thing he had to offer: "I cannot promise you a specific outcome. What I can tell you is that this time, someone is reading the file." He meant it. That was the only reason he was still doing the job after 22 years. The federal civil rights case was filed in the Eastern District of Texas Federal Court 6 months after the highway stop. It named the city of Lufkin, the police department, Chief Gordon Farrell, and Sergeant Garrett Pullman as defendants in a pattern and practice case alleging racially discriminatory enforcement, systematic suppression of legitimate complaints, and failure of supervisory oversight. Officer Terry Brandt was named individually on a charge of deprivation of rights under color of law under 18 United States Code Section 242. Brandt's attorney released a statement. Officer Brandt is a dedicated public servant who performed his duties as trained and acted entirely within department guidelines. He was not aware of the identity of the individual he stopped and cannot be held accountable for information he did not possess. He looks forward to being vindicated through the legal process. The trial was held the following spring in a federal courthouse in Beaumont. Marcus did not seek to testify dramatically. He sat in the witness box and answered questions with the precision of someone who had spent 22 years learning the difference between what was relevant and what was noise. He described the stop in chronological order. He described what was said and when. He described the moment Cortland arrived and what Brandt said afterward. The United States Attorney asked him one question near the end of his direct examination. and the courtroom had gone quiet enough that you could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. Mr. Webb, in 22 years of civil rights investigation, what is the thing that has surprised you most? Marcus was still for a moment, not thinking exactly. More like locating the right words from somewhere he did not often reach. That it keeps surprising me, he said. Every time I open a new file, some part of me thinks this department will have worked it out by now. Then I read the spreadsheet. The dates go back for years. The complaints have all been dismissed. And what I realize is that the people in those files had to gather themselves each time and write down what happened to them and submit it, knowing nothing would come of it. And they did it anyway. He paused. Their persistence surprises me. Not the cruelty, the persistence. Sergeant Pullman testified on the third day. He spent most of his time under cross-examination explaining why he had signed off on for complaint dismissals against an officer who had been documented on body camera and making remarks the prosecutor described as racially contemptuous. His explanation was that he had relied on the officer's written accounts and had not had cause to question them. The prosecutor asked whether he had reviewed the body camera footage before signing any of the 4 dismissals. Pullman said he had not had time to review every piece of footage for every complaint. The prosecutor set her pen down on the table. 4 complaints, she said, against 1 officer, over 3 years. Pullman looked at the table in front of him. He had no answer for that. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and 40 minutes, when the foreman rose to read the verdict. The room held its breath the way rooms do when everyone present already knows what is coming and is waiting only for the formality of it being spoken aloud. Guilty. On the civil rights charge under Section 242, guilty. On the charge of filing false incident reports, guilty. On the charge of obstruction by falsifying records, guilty. Brandt sat at the defense table in a blazer that looked borrowed. He had lost weight since the case began. He was 36 years old, but he carried himself like someone older. The way people carry themselves when something they believe to be true about themselves has been disproved in public. His attorney placed a hand on his arm. Brandt did not move. Chief Farrell had entered a consent agreement with the Department of Justice 2 months before the verdict and avoided trial. He announced his retirement the same week. The city hired an outside firm to conduct a full review of all complaint dismissals going back 8 years. Sergeant Pullman was suspended without pay for 120 days and demoted to patrol officer. He resigned before returning to duty. He did not release a statement. The sentencing hearing was held on a Tuesday in August, when the heat outside the courthouse in Beaumont was sitting at 94 degrees. The courtroom air conditioning ran hard the entire morning. Brandt stood before the federal judge in civilian clothes. No uniform. No badge. No swagger. Just a 36-year-old man in a borrowed blazer who had run out of road. The judge looked at him for a long time before speaking. Longer than was comfortable. Long enough that several people in the gallery shifted in their seats. Mr. Brandt, the court has reviewed the complete record in this case. What is documented here is not a single error in judgment on a difficult day. What is documented is a pattern, sustained across years, of using the authority of this uniform to treat people as something less than what they are. You stopped a man on a public highway for no reason other than that he matched a category you had already decided deserved stopping. When informed he was a federal employee and asked to reconsider, your response was not to reflect. It was to continue. Brandt's jaw worked slowly. His lawyer had told him to hold the judge's gaze. He was trying. You are sentenced to 37 months in federal prison. You are permanently barred from employment in law enforcement in any jurisdiction in the United States of America. You will serve 3 years of supervised release following your sentence, and you will pay restitution in the amount of $12,400 to be distributed equally among the 7 complainants, whose cases are directly and documentably linked to your conduct. The gavel came down with a sound that was smaller than you would expect for something that large. The marshals moved forward, and then, in the space of that transition, something happened that no reporter present noted because it was quiet and small and easily missed. Brandt turned and looked across the courtroom. He scanned the gallery until his eyes found Marcus, who was sitting in an ordinary seat 3 rows back. Not at the prosecutor's table, just a person watching a legal proceeding. He held Marcus's gaze for 4 seconds. Then he mouthed 2 words. slowly, clearly, so there was no possibility of misreading them. "I am sorry." Marcus looked at him without expression for a long moment. He did not nod. He did not look away. He held eye contact until the marshals moved Brant toward the door. Then he looked down at his own hands resting in his lap. He did not feel triumphant. He had never felt triumphant at sentencing hearings. Not in 22 years, not once. What he felt was something quieter and harder to assign an aim to. Something between grief and relief. Because a verdict is not an ending. It is a line drawn in a specific place that says, up until here, this happened. From here, we will try to do better. 37 months was not going to give any of the 47 people on that spreadsheet their day back. Their dignity back. The years they had spent submitting complaints to a department that rooted every single one of them into a drawer and closed it. But the next person stopped on Highway 90 in Angelina County would be stopped by officers who knew, in the most concrete possible way, that there were consequences now. That the badge was not armor, that the system had eyes on it. The East Texas Accountability Project released a statement the evening of the sentencing. It read, in part, "We are grateful for the investigators who took this seriously. We are grateful for every person on that list who wrote down what happened to them, even when they believed no one was reading. Today, someone read it." Marcus saw the statement on his phone in the parking lot outside the courthouse at 6:41 in the evening. The sun was still above the horizon, a flat orange disk over the pine trees to the west. The kind of East Texas sunset that seems to last longer than physics should allow. He sat in his car for a while. He was not renting it anymore. He had bought a Malibu 6 months ago, same model, same forgettable silver. He drove it everywhere now. Some habits become permanent before you realize they have. He thought about his father. About 2 hours and 14 minutes in the back of a patrol car in Baton Rouge. About the way James Webb had walked through the kitchen door that evening 36 years ago and sat down, without saying a word, and eaten his dinner in silence. His father had died 11 years ago. A stroke, quiet and sudden, on a Tuesday afternoon on the front porch of the house in Scotlandville. He never knew what his son had built from the thing that had happened to him. Marcus had never found a way to tell him. That was its own kind of weight, and he had carried it long enough that it had become familiar. He thought about Chester Rowan, about the old man saying they never change, and then calling Marcus's office after the verdict and saying, "I was wrong. Took a while, but I was wrong." Marcus had said, "You were not wrong about the past. You just did not know what was coming." He started the car. He rolled the windows down. The evening air came through warm and smelled like pine and red clay and the particular kind of open space you only get in East Texas when the road runs straightened. There is nothing between you and the horizon but sky. He pulled out of the parking lot and drove north. He was not done. There was another file open on his desk in Washington. Another spreadsheet. Another county. Another list of names where the complaints had been filed and dismissed and filed again, where people had tried to tell the truth and been handed silence in return. It mattered. Every name on every list mattered. That was the only thing Marcus Webb had been completely sure of for 22 years. Not the verdicts, not the consent decrees, not the badge seizures or the departmental reforms or the federal oversight panels. Just that simple, stubborn, unglamorous fact. It mattered. He drove north as the sun went down behind him, and the road darkened ahead and the pines closed in on both sides, and the world outside the windshield narrowed to headlights and yellow center lines in the kind of silence that is not empty, but full of something you cannot quite put into words. Some people carry pain quietly because they believe no one would understand. Some institutions protect the wrong people for so long that those wrong people start to believe the protection is permanent. It is not. Nothing that depends on silence is permanent. Eventually someone pays attention. Eventually someone sits with their hands on a steering wheel on the shoulder of a Texas highway and counts every violation carefully and writes it down. That is not heroism. That is just doing the job. But sometimes doing the job is enough to change everything. I want to be direct with you about something. Stories like this one exist because real people submitted real complaints that went nowhere for years. The spreadsheet in this story is fictional. The pattern it represents is not. The Stanford Open Policing Project analyzed over 95 million traffic stops across the United States and found that black drivers are stopped at significantly higher rates than white drivers in the same areas. That disparity increases at night, when race is less visible. That data is public. That research is peer-reviewed. The numbers were not invented for effect. The question this story is really asking is not about Marcus Webb. He had a credentials case. He had a federal investigation already in progress. He had Diane Cortland in a second vehicle 3 minutes behind him. The question is about the 37 other people on that spreadsheet who had none of those things. They filed their complaints. They waited. They were told their complaint had been reviewed and dismissed, and then some of them filed again. That persistence, quiet and largely invisible, is what made the case. Marcus built the file. But the 47 people who wrote down what happened to them, knowing nothing would come of it, those people built it first. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have ever been in a moment where you wrote something down even when you believed no one would read it, I hope you know that someone out there is reading. Thank you for staying until the end.